there is a very significant need for this bill to be referred to a select committee for further inquiry in respect of a few matters. Now, first, you will find that this bill does not at all speak about the kinds of tests that are to be recognized as the proper tests by which we get results in DNA analysis. So you've got an act here, a proposed act, which speaks about the way in which samples are to be taken, the way in which samples are to be stored, DNA data bank and so forth, but there is absolutely no provision, no details given as to what kind of tests, the standards that are required, whether or not these standards are acceptable internationally. And I think that should be the focus of the bill. That should be the focus of the act, because the act proposes to allow taking of samples, analysis of samples, and then storing of this of the data from the samples in the bank. Right? So this act, if you look at it after a very, very careful reading of it, you will realize that the most important part of it isn't there. Yeah, because it does not state, and it does not address standards. So what's the point of having an act which doesn't actually state what kind of tests our government recognizes? And in this regard, I'll just point out two areas which was debated on again very, very heavily last time, but we see absolutely no changes being made. I'll read section 24. Section 24 says, notwithstanding any written law to the contrary, any information from the DNA data bank shall be admissible as conclusive proof of the DNA identification in any proceedings in any court. So one, we do not know whether or not the tests meet the standards required by the international world. Two, we have a system which says, never mind, the samples will be analyzed, the results, conclusive proof in any court proceeding. And you ask yourself why. It's very strange, because the last time the bill was brought forward in terms of importance and urgency, Anwar Ibrahim's case was around the corner. And now suddenly you have the bill coming up again next week, and guess what? Anwar Ibrahim's case is again around the corner. Now let me just highlight this. If you look at section 27 of this act, and this I think is most dangerous for everyone, not just Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, but all Malaysians, it says this: saving and transitional. Any existing DNA profile and any information in relation thereto, kept and maintained by the Chemistry Department of Malaysia or the Royal Malaysia Police immediately before the coming into operation of this act, shall, on the coming into operation of this act, be deemed to have been kept and maintained and to form part of the DNA data bank established under this act. So what does it say? It says in no uncertain terms that all tests conducted before shall become part of the DNA data bank. And if you look at section 24, it shall be admissible in court as conclusive proof. Now we will remember in 1999, Anwar Ibrahim's case, there was an admission by the police that the samples that were taken for DNA testing were contaminated. So we ask ourselves this question: is this an act which is brought forward, sought to be passed in anticipation for a conviction in Anwar Ibrahim's trial? Why is it that this act speaks about conclusive proof in all legal proceedings? And why is it that this act says, never mind, we are not interested in how you came about the result, as long as there is some information, even before, automatically it becomes admissible? These are the things that we need to discuss. And these were issues that were taken during the last sitting. And I think at that point of time, even Dato' Anifah Aman, at that time not minister yet, he himself stood up and he himself agreed with most of the arguments that we took. But we don't see any change. Now you can almost imagine. Let me ask a simple question. What if an earlier DNA test or DNA profile has already been proven wrong? Has already been proven wrong? Under this bill, under this act, it will still be admissible as conclusive proof. Because it is a data or DNA data profile which was existing before this act came into force, automatically it forms part of the database, and straight away it is usable in court. And as I said, it's a coincidence again that Anwar Ibrahim's case is around the corner. So I think that these are issues. I don't think Parliament is serious in looking into the complaints of members of Parliament. This was a bill that was debated not only heavily by the opposition, in opposition, but many members of even the backbenchers supported it, supported us. But we see exactly the same bill, no changes, being tabled again. So this is the reason why we have called and we continuously maintain that this is a bill which involves a very, very significant part of law. Because in the years to come, a lot of convictions, not only convictions, but also paternal matters, family matters, will depend on this DNA data bank. All of us are affected by it, whether we like it or not. So what is required is a select committee to look into the details. What are the tests? Whether these tests are recognized globally. Recently there were cases in Australia where convictions were called up, revisited and set aside because they accepted that the tests used by the DNA experts there had faults. So we have seen in this as far as we are concerned, globally there have been cases. So a select committee, as we said again, sharpen up these parts. I think the most significant part is, what are the tests? How do we measure ourselves there? How do we measure up to standards of the international world, which is what we want to achieve? It is not even mentioned in this bill. So we call, I would say again, we maintain our call for a select committee. I've also filed, the last time I put in a motion for amendment, and of course this time I will not be able to do that because I'm in Parliament, so I've asked my colleague, the MP for Serdang, Tioni Ching, who is here today, to make those proposals again. Now, in short, what we are going to do, and I think the thrust of it, if I may inform Mr. Lim, is that we want an amendment to Section 24. Now, I read earlier Section 24, and you can see the significance of what it is I said, where you have a situation where there's a mistake. Nobody can correct it, because the system or the law today does not allow for it. So here, what we are saying is, in Section 24 talks about how it is that information from DNA bank shall be admissible as conclusive proof in any proceedings in any court. But we have asked, and we will be asking again, that it be amended to allow the court to have a discretion. So it would read like this: notwithstanding any law or any written law to the contrary, any information from the DNA data bank shall, unless directed otherwise by any court, be admissible as conclusive proof of the DNA identification in any proceedings in any court. Now, the argument is simply this. Now, they argue that, look, DNA is almost conclusive, so we will never make a mistake. That's the reason why it should be conclusive, and that's the reason why the court should not be troubled to interfere. Well, my reply to that is very simple. If it is 100% sure and 100% conclusive, then there is no reason for you to fear the court having a discretion. Because if you're so sure you're right, then the court is obviously not going to interfere. But, as we see in Australia, there may be a situation where a valid complaint is raised to the taking of samples, the manner the test was done, contamination. These are issues which I think at the end of the day, the court must ultimately decide. We are still in the early stages. We are still very new to this area of law. And I think that the government should encourage debate, practical debate. Now, the practical debate happens in court.